You know something? Our producer, Corey and Ganamart, has an unbelievably strong T-shirt game. And he sits in front of me, but we have computer monitors blocking our view of one another. And he stood up on the break, and I'm looking at his T-shirt. And it says, it's a picture of a hot dog under the word keep. Keep hot dogs out of women's sports. It's phenomenal. It is the best. I'm going to share it on X so you can see it. Good to have you with us today. Coming up on the program, Joe Concha will be here at 4:30. We'll talk to him about how the left got so crazy. And we'll probably summarize that in a single segment. That'll be fun. And then Congressman Anthony D'Esposito is here at 5 o'clock. He's from New York. We'll talk to him about this decision today by the Biden administration to reach a plea deal with Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. Yeah, that's right, the mastermind of the 9/11 attacks. You can join us, 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Yeah, in the last hour, we've been talking about how men are now successfully beating up women in the Olympics, punching them, ending the fight in 46 seconds today, as the Italian boxer, the woman, has said, I don't really want this to go on any longer. I don't want to be punched in the face by a dude anymore from Algeria, so she threw in the towel. Her countrymen were warning her, don't go in the ring with the guy. Boycott it. Don't do this fight. She said, well, I've been training my whole life for this. I need to try anyway. So she gets in, and then she decides she's had quite enough after she gets hit by a man. She said it's the hardest she's ever been hit. Never been hit like that before in her career as a boxer. So that's where we are. And the Kamala campaign is all over this. They're all on board with this. Corey, talking more about Corey. Corey, on your social media today, you posted, was it Josh Shapiro? Yeah. So the governor of Pennsylvania, Josh Shapiro, who at this hour, all the chatter is that he's apparently changed some travel plans going into the weekend. So it's very likely that Josh Shapiro is going to be the pick. I'll get to more on that in a moment because he's a Jewish guy, and the left has a lot of anti-Semites in their base, and it's creating some real problems for Kamala Harris's campaign. A number of news stories today, including in the New York Times, that Josh Shapiro may be an issue for her because the base is too anti-Semitic on the left to have a Jewish guy join the ticket. And, just the crazy world that these people occupy. But Josh Shapiro has previously stated online, trans women are women. Trans women are women. In other words, men are women, he declared forcefully. And so that's, if it's true that he's the running mate, there you go. So a clear early indicator that he's a psycho, that she's adding a psycho to the ticket if she does choose him, and to join the other psycho is at the top of the ticket who believes in the very same ideology that is so destructive to women. The policy of the Biden administration is to normalize men stealing privileges, spaces, protections from women. That's what they're for. That's why they're recategorizing Title IX to mean something that it was never intended to mean, which is that now men can become women. This is the redefinition game that they're playing. So in case you're looking for, I know there's people on the right, we talk about, what's the line of attack on Kamala? Here's one. She's a psycho. This is a psychopathic policy that they're advancing. Nobody is for it. The clearest indicator in this entire saga is women's sports. If you talk about women's sports with literally anybody, they all agree, whether they say it out loud or not. And to the extent that they're silent on it, it's because they're trying to just create some cover for the left and its power. They're like, well, I can't talk about this. But very few people are willing to say out loud, men should be in women's sports. Men should be in women's sports. It's insanity. All right, let's see. I've got a lot of your calls are coming in on this subject, so I really want to take them. Matt in Rockville, line 8. Matt, sir, good afternoon. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Oh, hey, Vince. These women and everyone really who were in the Olympics, they're fighting for their country, whether it be swimming for their country. So they're doing something for bigger than them.
Yeah.
And I think that any of these women who are going to fight this man, the only acceptable response is to get to the ring, go in, touch gloves, and then quit. Because fighting this guy is an acknowledgement that he is a woman. And if they're willing to go to the Olympics and fight for their country, fight for something bigger than themselves, then they have to acknowledge that biology is bigger than them. And they should do this. Not only would they be embarrassing the hell out of the Olympic Committee and forcing their hand on this, but it's self-preservation. They could be killed in the ring or at least severely damaged. This girl has a broken nose now. So I think the only acceptable solution, and it would be terribly hard to do because you've worked your butt off your entire life to get to this moment.
Yeah.
But this is bigger than them. And
well, it's taking a stand against cheating.
It's
taking a stand against cheating. So if you've spent your whole life working towards that moment, what you were looking for was a fair fight. It wasn't like she was shying away from a punch. She wants to be in a fight in that ring. And so I think this is fascinating. So what you're suggesting, Matt, is kind of a Tiananmen Square standoff. You get in there and you say, I'm not doing this. I'm not taking it. And take the photos of her deciding at that moment that she's not going to take this fight because of that. It's so completely unfair. I think that woman, should she do that, she'll walk away with one of the biggest profiles in Olympic history. That would be an amazing moment. I think the benefits to her and to the planet would be immense.
Absolutely. It's bigger than them, and this will hopefully end this madness now. And Riley Gaines was way ahead of the curve, and I think that if the women do this, it'll force the hand and bring some normalcy back. And I also just love the intersectionalism that's happening here. How can you be pro-women and then also watch this woman get a broken nose and sob while all of her dreams go down the drain because she has to fight a man?
Yeah, because it's all nonsense. And it's so incoherent, eventually it was going to come back in on itself, which is what's happening now. Matt, thank you. Such a smart point. I agree. That'd be, I think, an amazing and historic image for a woman to get into that ring and then instantly call it off and say, this is unfair. This can't happen. It's fascinating. And so we'll see what happens. They have another guy who's in the Olympics who's supposed to box and all this from Taiwan. And I don't know if that match has taken place yet, but that's expected as well here. Robert in South Carolina, line 7. Robert, good afternoon. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hey, good afternoon, Vince. As always, thanks for keeping it real. Thanks for reporting the news.
Thank you, sir.
Listen, there's 3 people to blame for this whole situation in the Olympics. Former and current leaders of the free world, Obama, Biden, and Harris. The world, they follow the U.S., and this gender garbage started in the U.S. The window was opened under Obama, and the floodgates were opened under Biden and Harris. And Harris is running for president.
Yeah.
And I hope folks realize that. A lot of your callers mentioned where are the dads, where are the moms, where are the athletes themselves speaking up? Well, I hope they speak up during this next presidential election.
Yeah, me too. I do too. And you're right. It was, the United States engages in this craziness. It spread like a cancer around the planet. And have you noticed, Robert, that especially a lot of the European countries have begun to start reeling it back? They're attempting to come back from the edge because all these kids have been mutilated by this vile ideology. And we've noticed a number of countries, especially in Western Europe, who are saying, well, wait a second, we need to get rid of this. This is bad. They're doing these studies and they're like, this is not actually good for these kids. And somehow Europe, which we used to mock, it was like, they're crazy. We'll never be as crazy as them. Now it's inverted entirely. Now it's America that's full-blown Looney Tunes, and Europe is heading in the proper direction on some of these questions.
No, you're absolutely right, Vince. I think countries like the UK and a couple other countries have realized, holy cow, the United States has lost their mind.
That's for sure.
And they are reeling back on this, on the gender surgeries and males and female sports and things of that nature. But the American people need to realize when they go to the polls in November that this is as much Kamala Harris as it is Joe Biden and Barack Obama.
Yeah, amen. Thank you, Robert. It's a smart point, and Kamala should wear the shame of what she has done to so many women and girls. So here's let me add on to what Robert just said about the American left and the political incentives that are built into all of this. After the gay marriage decision in the early teens, the Obergefell decision, after the gay marriage fight, for what it was, concluded as an issue in American politics, the apparatus that existed to make lots of money off of that issue needed a new shtick. They needed something new. They didn't have gay marriage anymore to fight around. So what were they going to pick up? And the answer to that became transgender surgeries, medication, the entire health industry that revolves around what they call, in a vile euphemism, gender-affirming care. That's what rose out of the ashes of that debate. And it was designed, the reason it's been so powered up is designed to bring in a crap ton of money, and boy, has it. And today we've got another story in that saga that was published, interestingly, in the New York Times. Just published this afternoon. And the headline on the piece is, "A pattern of lavish spending at a leading LGBTQ nonprofit." And the organization they're talking about is GLAAD, GLAAD. The, what was it? The Gay and Lesbian Alliance Against Defamation. I forget the crystal clear acronym here. But either way, GLAAD, you have been familiar with it probably for years. And they talk about how the CEO of GLAAD is a woman called Sarah Kate Ellis. Now, remember, this is a tax-exempt nonprofit. It's supposed to be a charity whose mission is supposed to be to the benefit of the country, right? That's why it receives tax-exempt status, nominally, of course. But in practice, what they're doing is very different. So they're taking in ungodly sums of money. They have an annual budget of roughly $30 million. They're a tax-exempt nonprofit. And they're using a big chunk of that cash to pay for ski trips for this woman. They're paying for endless first-class flights. They're paying for the most expensive car service you've ever seen, thousands upon thousands of dollars for small trips and black cars as she's going to and fro. They're paying for her Cape Cod summer rental. They give her $20,000 to remodel her home office. They outfitted it with a brand new chandelier. It is as over-the-top and decadent as you can possibly imagine. And what this is, to me, and the New York Times doesn't ground it in this topic, but I'm here to tell you what it's about. What this is they decided to take hold of, just like Planned Parenthood, I should point out. Planned Parenthood, their biggest business now is transing kids. That's their biggest business. They're in the hormone business now. So if they don't scramble their brains before they're born, they're going to do it after. That's the new Planned Parenthood mission. And all of these organizations are transitioning. I didn't mean to use that word, but that's what they're doing. They're transitioning into gender-bending organizations that are a part of enriching the big hospital companies all across the country who are engaged in this very lucrative and simultaneously destructive business. So GLAAD is making all of this money, taking a ton of cash in, and they're using it and abusing it. The New York Times here, obviously this is a fight internally. Somebody is spilling their guts about what's happening inside of GLAAD and is saying that this money's being blown in order to create a luxury lifestyle for the executives, which is a tale as old as almost every left-wing nonprofit can be. And so this is just the latest chapter, just out this afternoon, as the organization GLAAD, now accused of an immense amount of decadent, wasteful spending on the lavish lifestyle of its executives. And what's the mission again? What was the mission here? Well, it turns out the mission these days is the destruction of far too many human beings. And again, Kamala Harris and company, they breathe life into all of this. How many GLAAD events has Kamala gone to? You know, has she gotten any trophies from them? Oprah has. There's that. Her picture's featured here. She's a big recipient of GLAAD awards. All sorts of people. Let's take Mike in Sunshine Line 7. Mike, good afternoon. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hey, Vince, thanks for taking my call.
Yes, sir.
Unless we learn otherwise, I would bet this Khalif boxer has the same condition as Caster Semenya. You know, Caster Semenya won Olympic gold in the women's 800 meter in London and in Rio. Mm-hmm. And he is XY.
Yes.
He has a condition called 5-ARD. You can look it up.
Right.
And I would bet any money that this Khalif guy is intersex. Castor actually has had children with a wife. They've harvested, male gametes from him, and he's actually has 2 children. So, and he won Olympic gold as an XY runner against XX runners.
Yeah, I remember this. And I think you're right. All of the available evidence suggests that this boxer has the same condition, but still XY chromosomes, huge advantage, testosterone advantage over these women, hitting like a freight train. And scaring the hell out of this woman who wanted to compete for an Olympic medal herself today.
Yeah, they say that the problem is in utero, where there's not enough testosterone to produce male genitalia, so they come out basically female. But then when they at puberty, they get a lot of testosterone, and they look like men.
Yeah. Well, these guys look a lot more masculine than a bunch of the male staffers at the White House today. So like, I don't know what condition they have, but you're right. This is not the first time this has occurred. Mike, thank you very much. I appreciate the call. Let's get Mark in Maryland in here, line 8. Mark, good afternoon, sir. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hey, Vince, how you doing, buddy?
All right, sir.
Let me say this. I think where we're headed to in 28, they're probably going to have a transgender division. Is where we're headed to. But here's the problem. You're right, Vince. This is generated by the left. Okay, The left is totally generated this. But you know what? The right has to wear this too, because they've sat there and done absolutely nothing about this. Here's the problem.
They went along with the pronouns.
They're going along with the program. Here's the problem I have with the right. Now, I understand why they wanted to overturn Roe versus Wade, because let's get it out there, Vince. There are a lot of women out here who are taking more than half the pills like they think it's Skittles. They get pregnant, take more than that pill, I'll be fine in 6 weeks. And that shouldn't be the case, because you're killing kids. You're killing life. So I understand that. But why don't we ever address prayer or faith in this country? Amen. We never address it. And the Republicans, if they address that, the Democrats would have nothing to say about, yeah, that's exactly what you would hear. That's what you would hear. From the Democratic Party. But if the Republican Party sits back and says, we're the party of God, well, you're not advertising it. You're not advertising that you love the Lord. You're not advertising that you want this. The Lord can fix all these situations for the alphabet community, and they're going to come to it's going to wind up going to a transgender situation coming up in the next few years, which is coming in 28, which is so sad.
It is
sad, Vic.
It is. I agree with you. And you know something? A couple weeks ago, President Trump's life was saved by the grace of God. He even said as much. And we would all do well to recognize that there's very much a spiritual component to all of this. Mark, thank you for reminding us. All right, hold on. Coming up, Joe Concha will be with us. We'll talk about how the left got here. Hey, good afternoon. It's now 4:36 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up today, Congressman Anthony D'Esposito from New York is with us at 5 o'clock. We'll talk to him about the decision by the Biden administration to arrange a plea deal with 9/11 mastermind Khalid Sheikh Mohammed 23 years later. The White House telling us today, what? We had no idea where this was coming. Sure. You can join us, 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. How'd the left get so crazy? What happened to them? There's a new book out, Progressively Worse, Why Today's Democrats Ain't Your Daddy's Donkeys. The author of that book is Fox News contributor, media and politics columnist Joe Concha, and he joins us here on the phone. Joe, good to have you with us, sir, and congratulations on the new book.
Thank you, Vinny. Appreciate it. It's a labor of love.
How many of these books are you going to write? Aren't you done with books yet? You got all these books. No. That's a lot of work.
Let's see. I had one 2022 that was Come On Man, the truth about Joe Biden's terrible, horrible, no good, very bad presidency. And then that did really well. So I'm like, okay, now I'll do Progressively Worse, Why Today's Democrats Ain't Your Daddy's Donkeys. And basically what we do is we look at the records of JFK, for example, or even President Carter, President Clinton, President Obama, and then we compare it to whatever this version is of the Democratic Party we see today. And it is horrifying because this was a party that used to do some common sense things, right? I mean, you had John F. Kennedy. He cut taxes when he inherited a recession in 1961. We had GDP growth that went to nearly 7% as a result. And obviously, he was for a strong military. He was against racial quotas. If JFK were running today, he would be painted as an extreme MAGA Republican.
Yeah.
Then you look at Jimmy Carter, right? He was a pro-life Democratic president. That is practically extinct now as far as the Democratic Party. I think there's one pro-life member of Congress left, and that's it. So, yeah, I guess that whole thought process is gone. So much for diversity. And then Bill Clinton, though, I mean, his record, you take away Monica's. People think of Lewinsky first. But this guy was so smart. In 1994, he takes a drubbing in midterms, and obviously we had a GOP House contract with America, and he could have done two things. He could have done what Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, and Democrats do now, which is to run to Twitter and just play snark tweeting at Republicans all day and not even attempt to work with them. Or, maybe I'll win re-election by going to the center and doing things that people like and is popular. Like, for example, balanced budget amendment. We actually had budget surpluses at the end of the 90s as a result of that. Or ending the welfare slate. What am I trying to say here? State, thank you. Or, I mean, the fact that he declared, Bill Clinton did, the era of big government is over, and he actually shrank the government, and these things were very popular. And he won 1996 so easily, and even Barack Obama was labeled the deporter-in-chief because he deported so many people through his very capable DHS Secretary, Jay Johnson. So you look at these four presidents, or even Tip O'Neill for that matter, working out things with Ronald Reagan over a drink after work because they were civilized people who thought about the good of the country.
Yeah.
Now, Kamala Harris, Vince, as you've been talking about on your show, when you want to ban fracking, you want to end the fossil fuel industry, you want to abolish ICE, you support sanctuary cities, you want to give free health care to illegals, you want to end private insurance, you believe in late-term abortion, you believe that biological men should compete against biological women, and we saw what happened at the Olympics, which was just horrifying. I could go down the list, but these ain't your daddy's donkeys anymore.
No, they're not. And so I kind of feel like Obama is the Trojan horse in the center of all of this, because Obama comes into office on this promise that we're not a black America, we're not a white America, we're not a liberal, we're not a conservative America, we're the United States of America. He gives these big speeches about how we need to be unified as a country. He comes in with the majority opinion on the subject of marriage. When he came into office, he held that it was between a man and a woman. He basically occupied this space where he would talk about the issues of the country in a way that were broadly accessible to the majority of the country. But things seem like they really accelerated in a very radical direction during his 8 years in office.
Exactly, and progressively worse. That I see that as the turning point around 2008, 2009 in terms of the way the media went about their business. I mean, in 2005, 50%, half the country still trusted the media. It's down to about 31% now, and obviously among Republicans, it's in the single digits for very good reason.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think social media began to emerge then, and then you saw Democrats. You see it today with AOC and Eric Swalwell, Adam Schiff. They all exist not to pass legislation, again, for the good of the country or to compromise with the other side. They're all about likes, retweets, and getting on Stephen Colbert. And so I think social media really emerged during that time. I think MSNBC, I give them a full chapter in the book, they used to have Tucker Carlson on its air as a primetime host. They had Jesse Ventura as a host. Who else did they have? Somebody crazy.
Glenn Beck. Glenn Beck was a CNN headline news host, I believe, at the time.
That's right.
Yeah.
Laura Ingraham was on there. I mean, you could go down the list. They weren't a conservative network. They weren't a liberal network. They actually tried to speak to all voices and give different voices different opinions. And then Oprahman and Maddow took over, and then that was the end. And then they never went back. And then we saw that evidence just a couple of months ago where they hire Ronna McDaniel, and she doesn't even last 48 hours because the inmates say, we can't have a Trump supporter on here. That's nuts. So, I think media went left, social media emerged, and that's why the Democratic Party has been pushed in this direction.
You said something that made me think about, kind of where they are now, which is that they don't even bother themselves with attempting to pass legislation. And part of this is that the left has this view that the government needs to operate without the interference of the voters, that the various agencies can do whatever they want, that the White House isn't allowed to impose its will on those agencies unless, of course, it's to achieve some sort of left-wing goal. Today, we find out that the Department of Defense or something apparently negotiated the plea deal with Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, and the White House wasn't even aware of it. How is that even possible? Is the executive branch, the White House should be aware of this. And one of the critiques I hear from the left, to the extent that they've looked at the contents of Heritage's Project 2025, they're like, oh, this is so radical that they would expect the president to be in charge of the agencies. I'm sorry. That's literally the first sentence of Article 2 of the Constitution. So to what extent have they decided to hell with governance, to hell with legislation? We'll just let the agencies make it up.
Wow. I mean, I'm asking Alexa right now. Alexa, what is a commander-in-chief? Because to your point, that's literally what the job description is. And instead, they're outsourcing this. DOD didn't even know about it. Of course they didn't know about it. When's the last time you saw Joe Biden live on camera? It's a serious question. Do I have to ask the proof of life question again? I mean, somebody's running his Twitter account. He puts out some statements here and there. He shouldn't be president right now. He should have stepped down. How could you run the country for 4 more years and say, oh, no, actually, I don't think I'm ready to do that, but you could still run the country for another 6 months? And everybody just forgot that he left the stage without even explaining really what. Hasn't taken one question. No, actually, two people haven't taken one question. Joe Biden, since he said he wasn't running again, and Kamala Harris, since she became the Democratic nominee. Not one question, and the press doesn't care.
No.
They should be demanding press conferences of this woman. But to your point, though, on abortion, that was sent back to the states. Now people are voting on that, whether they want it in their states or not. That's a good thing, but Democrats don't want that. They want central control over that. Same thing with student loans. You had the Congress is supposed to pass whatever involves purse strings and money and so on, and it goes through the Senate, and eventually the president signs off on it. They said, screw you, U.S. Congress, and oh yeah, Supreme Court, screw you too, who said this was illegal. We're going to do it anyway. So if I got to hear one more time about this is the party that's going to save democracy, when their nominee ran for president in 2020, didn't get one vote, and now is the nominee in 2024 and hasn't gotten one vote. I mean, enough with that argument. And if we had a somewhat honest media, they'd be calling it out on this, but nope, it's all pom-poms and cheerleading for Kamala Harris.
Joe, I just came up with a theory as you were talking about Joe and his being non-compos mentis and what that means for us. You know what I think it probably happened? I bet you they changed the procedure for how to do a nuclear launch. I bet you that story's going. I bet you that story will come out at some point after his presidency. Yeah, they had to change the way they handle that. The guy with the football, I'd like to see how closely he follows, like, whomever. Is he really following Joe Biden that closely? They probably changed the procedure, if I had to guess.
Wow, so it would go to like Lloyd Austin or somebody?
Yeah, somebody else. Or this is entirely reckless, and the guy who can't be prosecuted because his brain doesn't work is still allowed to fire the nukes. Maybe that's what's happening. It's so crazy. Let's talk about Kamala Harris now. So the left is handing this all off to Kamala. As we speak today, Democrats are voting in secret to make her the nominee. As of this morning, the delegates for the Democrat National Convention have begun voting online. You and I are not welcome at this vote. They're doing this behind closed doors. The vote is set to conclude on Monday night at 6 p.m. So by Monday at 6, Kamala will be made the nominee officially, and they haven't even had their convention yet. What do you see going on here, Joe?
Their conventions starts on Monday, August 19th. So 2 weeks before then, they're going to vote secretly online. Is everybody that afraid to go to Chicago because it's going to look like Gaza for a week? As far as you'll never see more Palestinian and Hamas flags flying out there. So I couldn't tell you what's going on here, Vince, except, again, this is Soviet kind of stuff. And I never spoke in these terms before. You know me, I'm not a hyperbolic guy, but this should scare everybody. And I would hope eventually – I think this is how this is going to play out. It's going to come down to the Harris-Trump debate if it happens. You could already see the groundwork being made that, well, Trump agreed to the September 10th ABC News debate against Biden, except Biden's not there anymore. So since it's a new candidate, logic says that it resets, you renegotiate the terms, and you pick a different date because now it's a different candidate that you're preparing against. And, of course, they're not doing that. So if she somehow can find a way out of the debate, and I'm sure they would love that, but let's say they do debate. 90 million people are going to tune in, maybe more. And how she performs will decide this election. And she's just like Biden, except she can't blame dementia. There's something broken in that brain where she has to speak extemporaneously and actually has to make an argument on her own, and it doesn't go well. And especially when you think about the record that I just brought up, and at least a dozen other things I didn't bring up, I don't see how she defends these things, quite frankly. And I think that's where the race is won. I think Trump wins because of two debates, one against Biden, one against Harris.
Yeah, I think you're right. The key is getting her off script. You know, I've been intrigued by the movement in the polls to the extent that they are valuable over the past few weeks, and they're moving in Kamala's direction, which the left is all very excited about. And that indicated to me that actually the cover-up of Kamala's brain has been far more successful than the cover-up of Biden's brain, hasn't it?
It totally has. Even though I saw a segment it was just being replayed on social media. CNN just maybe 2 months ago actually had a panel discussion on how maybe Joe Biden has to replace Kamala Harris on the ticket because she's dragging down the ticket. And now it's like, yeah, she's the best. So, yeah, I mean, there is something broken about that. I mean, you just go back and read and think about some of the things that she has said. I'm sorry. As long as we get decent moderators for this, if it is Fox, Brett Baer, Martha McCallum, for instance, that would be nice. And they ask really germane questions. And Trump preps, by the way. I know he doesn't like the prep because he wants to come across as authentic and not rehearsed, but he has to have these things ready, you know. And at the NABJ yesterday, when he was asked, is Kamala a diversity hire, basically, all he had to say was, do I think that she was chosen because of her race and because of her gender? Yes. And I know this because Joe Biden said that was the reason why she was being chosen, because he said he would have only a female black president, and that's that.
Yeah, so I agree with you completely. In fact, I thought that would have been a great point for Trump to bring up. Although I will say that the hysterical reaction to Trump's remarks yesterday is like, it's so funny. It's like, how many times have we seen this news cycle play out? He bicycle kicks the hornet's nest. The media overstates what he said in an effort to try and take him down. And all it does is force Americans to give it a little bit more scrutiny, and then to realize that, hey, Trump has a point. And the point that Trump was conveying is that Kamala Harris is a weather vane. She is a phony. She's an opportunist. And Trump said that in so many words yesterday. And if he had just stood on a stage, Joe Concha, and said, Kamala Harris is a phony, the media wouldn't cover it. But if he gets up there and he goes, man, who is this lady? She's constantly representing herself in completely different ways to completely different audiences. They're freaking out at him. And I think it's a good thing. I think, once again, he's got their number.
Yeah, I mean, did you see Kamala Harris in Atlanta where she had that fake accent that was like a bad imitation of the Hillary Clinton fake accent of a Southern accent? I mean, it was so cringeworthy to watch. And you're right, weather vane is perfect. And the big takeaway from that event yesterday, by the way, was the fact that Donald Trump was there. He was actually on stage, and Kamala Harris couldn't show up because, oh, my God, there's Harris Faulkner, and she had to face questions from her, not so much Rachel Scott, then it would have gone sideways. So now I guess she's doing it by Zoom. How's that going to work? Is Harris Faulkner allowed to ask questions on the Zoom call? And will she have a teleprompter that she's reading on Zoom? And will she get the questions advanced from ABC? Because, well, why wouldn't they do that, right? So, yeah, it's so phony. You're exactly right. That's exactly the word, phony.
And once again, Harris Faulkner's microphone won't be working when Kamala Harris is on the Zoom call. Hey, thank you very much, Joe Concha. Always good to talk to you. Congratulations on the new book, Progressively Worse. Yeah, I can't tell you how many times I've seen, I mean, you've seen it too. We've seen it together. President Trump will say something. The media will spin it beyond recognition. And then in the end, Trump succeeds in the underlying point that he was making in the first place, which is that Kamala Harris is a phony baloney. She doesn't have, at her core, she doesn't have realistic core values. It just changes. It literally, so when she was running 4 years ago, she came out with all these, we got to defund the police. We got to get rid of ICE. We need to support the Minneapolis Freedom Fund. We need to bail all these George Floyd rioters out of prison. All of these things were the product of her trying to run in a left-wing primary. And now as she wants to run in a general election, and as they're holding a secret vote as we speak to coronate her as the nominee, she's attempting to pretend like none of those positions existed. Oh, I'm changing it now. I'm not for Bernie Sanders' government, medical program anymore. They want to do the left's, big desire for years has been to just concentrate the entire health industry into the government. That the insurance industry, it's like we have to go to the government and beg on bended knee for health care. And for most people, that's like, no, that we don't want that at all. We don't want to have to do that. That's crazy. And so she's attempting to moderate these positions, back away from them. But this isn't the product of a politician who's evolving in a good faith way. Do people change their opinions over time? Sure. In fact, everyone should change at least a little. And in some ways, big ways. When the information gets to you that demonstrates that you were wrong before and that there's a better position moving forward. That's what it means to be human. But if you're just a windsock for whatever random claptrap is coming out of the mouths of your political allies at literally any given moment, you're not evolving. You're not changing for the better. You're just an agent of chaos. And that's what Kamala Harris is, a flip-flopping agent of chaos. And when President Trump gets on a stage, as he did yesterday, and he gets the media into a frenzy, in an effort to defend Kamala Harris, all of a sudden the debate is no longer about, oh, J.D. Vance is weird. Instead, the debate becomes, just how phony is this Kamala Harris? Mission accomplished. A big success yesterday. All right, we'll keep talking about this and so much more. Anthony D'Esposito, the congressman from New York, will join us coming up at the top of this hour, just minutes away. We will talk to him about the Biden administration's decision today to give a plea deal to the mastermind of the 9/11 attacks. Stay with us.